Good afternoon.
Hi.
Oh,
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay.
Good afternoon or morning for some.
Good afternoon to all of you. I hope we are hearing each other very well and also seeing each other very well.
Okay. Morning.
We hear you, at least. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Nice to see you too. And I do hope that we will have successful cooperation.
Absolutely.
Good morning, Mark. Mark is dialing in from LA, so it's you're up early or going to bed late. I'm not sure which of the two.
I won't tell. Hello, everyone.
What time is it over there?
Only 4:30.
Oh, okay. Well, waking up early, we're hoping.
So I think
Los Angeles nightlife isn't quite what it used to be during these times.
you can see we're just getting the rest on board. And I can see a few still missing. Rob also missing.
Yeah, we're just waiting for Rob and then we can start.
Right.
Just maybe 2 more minutes.
Luanda, do you know, are we, when we speak now, are we heard by everybody or just in this room?
By everyone right now.
Okay.
We have over 45 participants for the moment.
Great. So Mark just texted that Rob will come in a bit late. He will not be in the full event, but he will be here for the panel. So we are good to start.
So we're good to start. Good. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for investing your time with us to UNDP's Roundtable on challenges and partnership opportunities. Mirdita gjithve dhe mirë se ju uroj mirë së ardhje në turezën e UNDP-s, transformimi digital I tërë shoqërisë, prioritetet, sfidat dhe mundësitë për partneritet. Para se të kalojmë në fjalët përshëndetse, ju lutem më lejoni t'ju informoj se kjo tryezë po mbahet në gjuhën angleze.
Will be held in English language.
Për të përmbushur nevojat e audiencës sonë të konfirmuar sot, kështu që ka edhe përkthim simultan. Për të qasë përkthimin, ju lutem shkoni te butoni Interpretation, I cili ndodhet në panelin e poshtme të kësaj dritarje Zoom. Klikoni atje dhe duheni ta zgjedhni anglishtën për anglisht, ndërsa gjermanisht për shqip. Kjo është arsyeja për personat që e kanë Zoomin jo të përditësuar, versionin e vjetër, gjuha gjermane është për shqip. Before we dive into the welcoming remarks, please allow me to inform you that this
is informoj se kjo
English and Albanian languages to meet the needs of our confirmed audience today. So there is also simultaneous translation. To access this translation, please go to Interpretation button, which is located in the bottom of the panel Zoom window here, and click at the Interpretation button and choose English for English and German for Albanian, as many have outdated Zoom application. German for Albanian seemed the best fit for today's event. I'm Luanda Domi, and I will be chaperoning you through the welcoming section of this event, and then we'll pass on to our UNDP Deputy Resident Representative, who is also leading the process on digital transformation here within UNDP Kosovo office, for which you will hear more about later during the event. Without further ado, please allow me to welcome our UNDP Resident Representative, Ms. Maria Suokko, for welcoming remarks for this roundtable. Ms. Suokko, floor is yours.
Thank you, Luanda. Ladies and gentlemen, friends of digital transformation, colleagues, there's many of us here today, and we're really pleased to have you all with us. And for some, it's early morning, as we heard. COVID-19 has forced many of us around the world to rethink and reorganize our daily lives, from work to school to entertainment. In response to travel bans, school closures, and restrictions in terms of physical gatherings and keeping distance from fellow humans, we have turned to digital tools to keep some sense of normalcy. The pandemic has shown us the importance and the accelerated need to reshape and transform the way we work and conduct our businesses. Private and public sector entities in all areas of life, from agriculture to finance, education, entertainment to expert services, have had no other choice but to adapt to new business modalities, the digital new normal. The way we have responded to the COVID crisis as UN and as UNDP demonstrates how digitalization can be harnessed to support vulnerable people, reduce inequalities, sustain livelihoods, and strengthen solidarity. However, if unchecked, it could deepen exclusion, increase inequalities, and further divide us. While at times we've faced hardships and challenges in responding to the crisis, we see this very much as an opportunity for digital transformation. Digital transformation has gone from being an option to becoming a priority. As our partners know, the surge in teleschooling, teleworking, telemedicine, and digital payments being deployed by UNDP during COVID-19 crisis are just some examples. Investments in digital transformation are simultaneously driving our pandemic response and setting the path for accelerated progress as we move beyond recovery. Just to mention a few focus areas, we're helping the governments and institutions to keep their doors open, so to say, by operating remotely through digital platforms, while planning broader digital transformation strategies. Secondly, we're delivering critical government services or supporting the government entities, including healthcare and remotely. Thirdly, supporting data integration and insights for better decision-making. Fourthly, establishing digital payment platforms and e-commerce systems. And these are just to name a few. At UNDP Kosovo, we've actively engaged in introducing new, better ways of doing development in cooperation with our partners and beneficiaries. In response to the pandemic, UNDP is directly supporting institutional needs for improved communication, information exchange, coordination, and practical interventions. For example, we've helped in setting up an online job a registration system for job seekers so that they can apply for active labor market measures. We've conducted a lot of virtual trainings through Zoom and other means for Kosovo police, for court translators, and many more. We believe that with the right steps and actions, we can use the crisis as an opportunity to build forward better. In the area of digital transformation, we need to look into telecommunications infrastructure, conducive policy environment, and digital literacy as essential elements to be developed. There has never been a better moment to close the digital divide, to invest in infrastructure and skills, make institutions and societies more inclusive and resilient, and reinforce public confidence in the work of the institutions. For us, at least at UNDP, it's not digital transformation, it's not just about IT or focusing solely on operations and administration. It's really about how we can use digital technologies to connect to knowledge and to make it more accessible, both within UNDP and across our networks of partners, so that we can also provide better support and solutions for those we serve. Our transformation will also include using digital technologies to create opportunities to develop new business models through innovative financing, partnerships, and delivery models. I would really like to hope that we can take this opportunity of being together for a couple of hours to explore what is needed for a whole of society master plan for digitalization, which leaves no one behind. I think that your insights and our cooperation will be invaluable for realizing digitalization and digital transformation in Kosovo. I'm particularly pleased that we will have our colleagues from headquarters from our Chief Digital Officer's office with us today, a great pleasure. And even more so, really great to have such a diverse set of partners, current and future partners with us this afternoon. So thank you for being here with us. Over to you, Luanda.
Thank you very much, Ms. Suokko, for informative message on UNDP's interventions on digitalization and positive outcomes they have had in our daily lives and carrying on with our daily work. Now, without further ado, I would like to pass on the floor to Mergim Cahani, who is the founder and CEO of Gjirafa and basically our tech guru. And Ms. Cahani, the floor is yours, and welcome to this roundtable.
Thank you so much, Luanda. Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation, but above all, as a former member of the United Nations 20 years ago, I'm very happy to see initiatives of this sort on the global level. It's exciting because, as I would agree with Maria very well, that technology is here to stay, and digital transformation, there is no other way. We just have to work towards it and actually look into inclusion of the society, the governments and private sector to actually take advantage of it for progress and good. Otherwise, it may spin up and have negative impact. So I'm happy this is happening. I'm happy we have very good people in here. I know just about all of them, except Niels and Mark. Nice to meet you. So when I was thinking about this and often speaking, because it's such a, it seems a straightforward topic, but I think when you include different stakeholders, it becomes complex. And as an entrepreneur, I would think of it as in two ways. One is planning and modeling. What can we learn from others who have done it? If you look at it from government perspective, typically the best example that comes around is Estonia. And then if you look at it from the private sector, you see West Europe and the United States leading the pack. So in principle, trying to find a model for each industry and sector, I think is feasible and more tangible. But when it becomes a little bit more challenging, I believe in digital transformation, it's the execution of it. And me now thinking purely as an entrepreneur on the execution and implementation of it, it's one of the ways that is challenging because of the fast-paced change in technology. It's moving so fast, exponentially, not just the technology and the innovation, but also the amount of information that's being generated, that it makes it very difficult to do it right and keep abreast of the changes that are coming, even though it provides the technology transformation and digital transformation provides a lot of benefits. Because of that crucial point of ever-changing, fast-changing, I would like to share with you, just to open a conversation from that perspective. So I want to focus this opening in how can we execute in this scale with a lot of shareholders in an ever-changing, fast, exponential growing environment. So this is one thing. So when I was thinking about this after I spoke to Luanda, and I put my thoughts around it, and it seems that it depends on the case. It depends, are we talking private sector? Are we talking government? Are we talking inclusion of society? Are we talking broadband? So it's a lot of dimensions to consider. Eventually, I came up with some that I would like to share with you. What's in my thoughts is 5 principles that have to be considered when digital transformation would occur. And I would like just briefly to mention them, what those might be. The very first one to consider, I think, is agility. Agility, remaining agile in execution is crucial. And that I have seen often in any organization, including ours, but especially in bigger organizations, including governments, things go a little bit slower. And by the time it's planned and calculated how to execute, it might take several years. By the time it's ready to be executed, likely that plan is already outdated. And that's difficult because this may impact the government digitalization transformation in healthcare or education or civil registry or any idea. It might take years to develop the plan. By the time you implement it, you already have certain things that have been as a disconnect and not valid anymore. So the premises and the logic created for that plan may become invalid by the time it gets to be executed. So agility is critical to consider in project execution in shorter planning, shorter terms, as opposed to one grand master plan and then not being able to use it. Second, I would say is continuity. I tend to believe that sometimes it's often digitalization projects and transformation is viewed as a one-time thing. Every digitalization and transformation project has a start date, but typically doesn't have an end date because it's a continuous process. We cannot think of a project of a transformation starting this year, ending 5 years later. That's it, but it's a process, continuous improvement, adaptation, and continuous innovation. Digitalization provides effectiveness and efficiency in operation and inclusion, but if it's not kept abreast, it doesn't have the continuity, it may become obsolete very, very soon. And we have seen those projects everywhere occurring. The third piece, which I know and later on will be discussed, is in learning and education. It's very critical. Again, the premise of these 5 points or 5 principles, foundation principles, are based on rapid change in technology. So that's the driver of this. So if learning and education is not keeping abreast with the recent changes, it will be very difficult to adapt to those later on. So it has to be considered on any larger project in transformation. The fourth point will be what I like to call adaptation. This goes almost to every project, not just digital, but circumstances continuously change, external and internal factors. And I think being able to adapt on this fluid environment is very critical. We have seen large projects being very successful, and we have seen others who have stagnated. A specific example on this adaptation has been the participation in applying for citizenship for commercial purposes in Estonia through the web. They have continuously adapted to new changes depending on who's applying. So being able to adapt, even if at the first it was certain premises were made, and if later on those premises seem not completely inclusive or correct in a way, I think being able to adapt and change the premise is also very important. And last but not least, it was mentioned a little bit earlier, but we are saying digital transformation. Often in the projects that I have been exposed to, including at Gjirafa, with an exponential growth. We have over 100% growth year on year. It's important when we speak about digitalization to use the transformation as a piece of it. It's not just digitalizing existing processes. That's not really digitalization. It's changing those and transforming them into value-added services that otherwise were not possible because of missing technology. I mean, I don't have to say it, but it's a good thing that Henry Ford, when they created the cars first, he said, if we ask people what they want faster horses. If we took a project to digitalize telephone before rotary phone, before we had digit telephones, we would likely try to make it digitally to circles. So we cannot just think of digitalizing a process. We have to see how can the process, any given process, small, macro or micro, be transformed because of the advantages that technology provides. And I think that's very critical. It's not seen very often. So I think these principles, but not excluding potentially others, will be critical in any potential project, especially when there are a lot of stakeholders and from different industry. Private sector tends to move slightly faster. Government has certain laws and procedures to follow. So even if you want to move faster, you can't. But eventually it comes to a point that if certain procedures are delaying the project or are making it very difficult to execute, that project may not be as successful as if regulations were to be considered before the project started. So this, again, it's biased from my perspective because I think in execution more as opposed to solving problems, and certain principles are critical. But I'm sure the fact that it's involvement from different stakeholders on this call, it's exactly what that is meant to be. So I'm happy to see this, and I already see these patterns. Thank you very much, and I look forward to hear from others and hopefully contribute and learn some things from this initiative. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cahani, and please stay on with us as we look onto your insights to see how best we ought to carry out this process that is also benefiting to the business community here in Kosovo. Now, please allow me to pass on the floor, as I announced earlier, to our deputy resident representative, who is also leading the digital transformation process here within UNDP Kosovo, Mr. Niels Knudsen.
Thank you, Luanda. Afternoon, everybody, and morning to some. We still have the last panel speaker joining shortly, but we'll kick off now. So really pleased for this event today, because we are now moving into a very interesting, excellent panel, really, with 6 speakers. We will do it in a light style. This is a conversation. We can call it Davos style. So we will go from speaker to speaker with a few kickoff question, with a few short replies to the question, and then we do a second round of questions if time allows. And all speakers I'm sure I have a lot to bring to the table, so feel free also to add and adjust as you want to contribute as we go along. This is supposed to be as interactive a conversation as possible, and I will not frame this as any way because this has now been framed excellently by thanks Maria and Mergim. You've really set us up nicely with some very clear pointers, 4 excellent pointers that we will now probably dive a little bit more into. So with us today, I'll just introduce a panel, and then we'll get started. So with us today, we have first. Sorry, I'm on analog document also, so trying still to transform. We have Jeta Zagragja. Hope pronunciation is right, from UCXmarket, Director of Business Operations. UCXmarket, very exciting player here in Kosovo, working on as an e-commerce platform, really empowering sellers to bring their products to to the virtual market by enabling them to demonstrate the products and take them visually online. We have with us also Donjeta, Sahatçiu. Excellent. Luanda has trained me, I should say, before this. So, from STIKK, so the Kosovo ICT Association, is really works as the collective voice of the ICT industry, advocacy with government, but also trying to promote that space obviously is created for businesses and for investors that want to get in to work with the businesses on ICT in Kosovo. Welcome. We have with us also Mr. Agim Kukaj, who is head of Department of Post, Telecommunications and ICT in the Ministry of Economy and Environment. Working a lot, we'll hear more on digital strategy that is in the making. ME is also working with the steering committee on Kosovo digital economy and among a number of other things. With us also, we have welcome Mr. Uranik Begu from Innovation Center Kosovo, which really is one of the forerunners in Kosovo in terms of working with entrepreneurs. So ICK works with entrepreneurs and startups to help them evolve and break into the market. And you're also working on a number of other initiatives, also with the EBRD and the Star Venture Initiative as a startup mentor. Welcome. And we have Mr. Kujtim Gashi, who is with AShI, the Agency for Information Society, which essentially coordinates and proposes policies related to ICT and on Kosovo institutions, and particularly also around e-governance and a number of other areas. So welcome, and last speaker, actually perfect timing, Robert. Welcome on board. This was almost staged. So Robert Up is our UNDP Chief Digital Officer, sitting in our executive office, we call it, in New York, with the leadership in UNDP. Comes from a background with WFP and also a Boston Consulting Group. And we'll hear more shortly about what all this is about, also from a UNDP perspective in terms of digital transformation. So these, ladies and gentlemen, are the players on the pitch today. And I will shepherd you a little bit through with a few questions. So we'll go from speaker to speaker. I'll kick off with a quick question, and we'll have 3-4 minutes for response, and then we'll move to the next, and I'll come back to you also with a follow-up question, time allowing. Okay, so far so good. So first, we start from within the house. So Rob, since you're last comer, then you get the first question. So welcome. So essentially, can you kick us off on so why is UNDP going down this digital transformation journey ourselves now, and what expectations do you see? And we'll come back to that later around this tool you and the team has been working on around digital readiness assessment, particularly in light of also what was mentioned during the opening on the whole of society approach, and maybe if there are any snippets on what are we learning right now with COVID all around us. Yeah, over to you, Rob. Welcome.
Sure, thank you very much. And I apologize for slipping in a little bit late there. I was actually trying to get my technical setup in the right condition. So, well, it's a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for the invitation. And it's really great to be here. The journey of UNDP and digital transformation really started in late 2018, when the organization's leadership was reflecting on what are the major trends and effects likely to impact the future of development and the future of the organization. And there's no question that one of the major trends driving change in the world today is the pace and power of new technologies. And so if you consider, there for some time, there has been people looking at how do we apply technology to social impact. But actually, it's not just that, it's also that the entire context of development is changing. and it is changing more quickly than we actually are, in some cases, able to perceive. And so the organization decided to launch a digital strategy, and the digital strategy really recognizes that in order to stay relevant to serve its partners, UNDP needs to change itself. And the change is in the inside of the organization, so understanding how to modernize our organization and make sure that we have the technology able to support the change and enable the change, but it's also changing our programs. And so it's understanding where our partners are in their journeys and what kind of support they need. And so to kind of get to the point that you mentioned, Niels, it's sort of when we started looking at what our partners were saying in terms of requests for assistance, and this particularly became in a stronger way after the COVID pandemic. We started to see more and more requests and questions around what does an entire digital transformation strategy look like? And we realized that there are different models and different kinds of assessments out there, but we wanted to make sure that there was something, a tool or a framework that were really set up to look at the human development factor of transformation, because we believe strongly that it's not just a matter of introducing technology. It's a matter of introducing technology in a way that no one is left behind. And that is really the mandate of UNDP. That is what we look toward in the Sustainable Development Goals. And that's why we've created a digital readiness tool and an assessment and a framework that really focus on not just the technology being implemented, but the impact that it's having on a whole of society. I would leave it there for now, Niels, but happy to answer any questions about the readiness tool eventually.
Great, thanks, Rob. Let's move on in the conversation to Mr. Kujtim Gashi, from AShI. You're really sitting at the end of system that oversees and instructs and supports rollout. So can you give a few concrete examples, Mr. Gashi, of where Kosovo institutions are digitally transforming their public service delivery? Any cases, examples that are worth bringing up? And also from this journey you've been on already so far, where do you see key challenges in implementation and maybe areas where there's scope for acceleration? Please, the floor is yours.
Faleminderit zoti Nils. Faleminderit organizimit nga UNDP-a, që vërtet është një nga temat vërtet të rëndësishme për ne dhe gjitha institucionet e vendit. Sigurisht ky koordinim I mirë që është bërë mes akterëve të shumtë në Kosovë,
between many stakeholders like a private sector,
shoqëria civile, ICK,
Innovation Center, and other bodies that are very important in this phase. So this topic of discussion for the digital transformation is one of most current topic everywhere in the world, even more in Kosovo, where institutions in Kosovo have tried to achieve some activities and undertake some steps that have offered for our country and brought our country closer to the digital transformation.
Ndërmarrë, duke kriju institucione që mbajnë përgjegjësinë, siç është Agjencia e Shoqërisë së Informacionit, që është një organ bartës apo organi qendror I administratës shtetërore për zhvillimin dhe zbatimin e teknologjisë së informacionit dhe të komunikimit për të gjitha institucionet e Kosovës. Gjithashtu, institucionet e vendit, konkretisht agjencia, është përpjekur që të shfrytëzoj mbështetjen dhe përkrahjen edhe donatorëve dhe miqve tanë ndërkombëtar me përvojën që kanë në aspektin e transformimit digjital, dhe që nga 2013 kur është themeluar agjencia, ne jemi përpjekur që të konsolidojmë fillimisht një element që doja ta theksoj, si parakusht për transformimin digjital. Institucionet e Kosovës kanë shfrytëzojnë një rrjet të centralizuar kompjuterik, I cili shfrytëzohet nga të gjitha institucionet e vendit dhe ka shtrirje në gjithë territorin e Kosovës. Është shumë e rëndësishme se janë mbi 800 lokacione që kanë akses në këtë rrjet shtetëror dhe konsiderojmë se është një parakusht i rëndësishëm për ofrimin e disa shërbimeve elektronike digjitale. Deri tani Kosova ka arritur që të bëjë një modernizim të shërbimeve brenda qeverisë, apo shërbimeve qeveritare, duke përdor rrjetin shtetëror, si dhe duke shfrytzuar një qendër shtetërore të dhonave, e cila shërben për gjitha institucionet. Gjithashtu, nga elementet që mund të konsiderohen storje suksesi dhe të arritura, është edhe zhvilluar platforma e interoperabilitetit që ka kriju një ndërlidhje të rreth 20 sistemeve të rëndësishme që ato ndërveprojnë dhe shkëmbejnë dhëna mes vete. Kjo ka ullë në një formë...
This decreased a level of errors that could happen during the
mes sistemeve, si dhe ajo që ka mund të konsiderojmë storje suksesi dhe që synojmë që këtë vit të lansojmë është portali i shërbimeve elektronike, portali e-Kosova, i cili do t'jetë dritarja e vetme për ofrimin e shërbimeve elektronike për qytetarë. Tani jemi në fazën që mund ta konsiderojmë një element të rëndësishëm drejt hapave të transformimit digjital, ku po synojmë që të ofrojmë shërbime elektronike për qytetarët. Kjo natyrisht i ka dhe sfidat e veta, zoti Nils theksoi edhe shfaqi shumë drejt edhe sfidat që duhet t'i theksojmë në këtë proces, nga se Kosova ende nuk konsideroj që ka vënë në prioritet të prioriteteve zhvillimin e nivelit më të lartë të qeverisjes elektronike dhe fokusimin drejt prioriteteve, investimet në fushën e teknologjisë informative. Ne e shohim se teknologjia informative çdo ditë më shumë ndryshon dhe shfaqet nevoja për investime të vazhdueshme, konsideroj se ka një mungesë orientimi të politikave prioritare qeveritare për investime në këtë fushë dhe avancimin e transformimit digjital. Megjithatë, ndër të tjera, sfidë është edhe aspekti i ekspertizës dhe burimeve njerëzore që janë kapaciteti nevojshëm për avancim dhe modernizim të shërbimeve dhe ofrimit të shërbimeve nga administrata shtetërore. Këto konsideroj janë disa nga të arriturat dhe sfidat që ne po i shfaqim. Natyrisht do ta theksoj që një mbështetje të vazhdueshme në aspekt të transformimit digjital apo krijimit të parakushteve, një nga organizmat ndërkombëtare është UNDP-ja, që vazhdimisht ka tani disa vite kemi një partneritet të vazhdueshëm që kemi marrë një mbështetje për krahjen aspektin e këshillave, sugjerimeve dhe hartimit të politikave sa i përket sigurisë kibernetike, që është një nga sfidat aktuale, dhe besoj se ky lloj bashkëpunimi dhe ky lloj koordinimi neve do të na krijojë një parakusht të fuqishëm që ne të arrijmë të bëhemi pjesë e zhvillimeve globale për transformimin digjital.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Gashi. I should have added up front also that Mr. Gashi and AShI have agreed to, and we'll come back to that later, to be so-called our champion together on this digital readiness assessment that Rob mentioned as we roll it out. But we'll get back to that later. Yeah, thank you for that. Moving from a slightly different angle, Mr. Uranik Begu from Innovation Center Kosovo. You're bread and butter, sorry, and ICK and your whole life journey, it looks like, has really been around entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship and Kosovo really are two things that go hand in hand as concepts. The youthful population of Europe with a lot of skilled talent and opportunities and good physical connectivity or infrastructure connectivity. What are some of the trends you see coming out of and as Rob mentioned earlier, with the pandemic around us, what are some of the trends that you see coming out that Kosovars are using or could use as stepping stones for accelerating business innovation? Welcome.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you, Niels, for the introduction, but also I want to thank the previous speakers on painting such a great picture and really laying out setting out the tone for a great discussion, which is, I think, not just a need, but really an imperative for development from many angles. And I think entrepreneurship, startups are even more so. In this regards, talking about the process itself and priorities, and definitely listing out resources, but also some of the obstacles which were mentioned about. Definitely Kosovo praises itself on few aspects which are set to be known as a precondition for developing a tech environment and really becoming the tech hub of the region. And in this regard, you mentioned the youth, but also the high internet penetration and IT infrastructure, which the ministries, I think, and the agency has done and is continuously doing a great work in this regard, or just a set of preconditions which can really point out some of the opportunities that we have in hand, but also remind us of the opportunities missed. I think, especially when we're dealing with the youth, because statistics show us that youth or the unemployment among youth in Kosovo is in pretty alarming figures. So if we're talking about priorities, I think priority number one, and I would like to pick up in this regard with Mr. Gashi left, is really setting out the clear strategy and having the political compromise initially in an internal one, in setting out a tone and a direction where our economy and our pretty much our development should be focused. If we're talking about digitalization, we really need to answer the main and prior question: what are we digitalizing? And in this regard, I think the only thing we can talk about, in absence of a leading industry or a sector, then the government comes in as the biggest player. And that's why rightfully the business sector and the civil society and donors are so much pushing forward the government to really create the proper legal framework, to put in place the proper incentives in order to drive and be the driver of such a process of digitalization. In one hand, to really create services for its own citizens, increasing our well-being as citizens, but also on the other hand, seize an opportunity through which our youth can really engage and deliver on products and services which can be exemplary for the countries of the region, and why not a global one. I think as a business, as individual businesses and as a civil society, we have really given very good results. I would say modest, but still solid in terms of the conditions which we were operating. Frankly, what we're also alarming and what we're seeing is a lot of missed opportunities. Mainly and mostly, and I think Maria talked about access to finance as one of the obstacles. While we see great solutions and we see great innovations, I would say, and creativity among youth in solving some of our pressing issues, at the same time, we see many of these startups and companies quickly converting themselves into service companies for exporting services. And then really they're not solving anything locally. So all of this good talent and preconditions which we have, it's not really helping Kosovo to grow as fast as it could, as Mergim talked, have that exponential growth. We're being satisfied with the level of services and getting some extra income. We really focus on this sector because of many aspects. Obviously, the aspect of creating a better economy and increasing our exports and services and creating sustainable jobs is a priority. And at the same time, I think through this sector, we can prevent illegal migration, which has been a big issue for our youngsters, because jobs in this sector provide or sustainable jobs with growing interest, with growing need and demand, but also well-paid jobs, which in a way they create an opportunity for young people to consider not just consider staying in Kosovo, but also create a life and opportunity here. Apart from that, my last bit is that I am a bit more optimistic often than some people think I should be. And I really join the few voices in Kosovo in which we would like to be much more, I would say, proactive or aggressive in not just keeping our youth and creating opportunity for people in Kosovo, but really making Kosovo a place where others that consider engaging themselves in the field of digitalization or technology should consider Kosovo as a hub in really landing here and creating opportunities. We already see a lot of digital nomads and a lot of people coming and exploring the environment. They fall in love with the setting, but all in all, I think it goes back to the big top priority on what do we want to achieve with digitalization and how does this digitalization reflect on our products and services locally, hence social well-being, but also creating employability and increasing our exports, having in mind our trade deficit. I think I'll keep it at this in the start, but hopefully we can engage in discussion later. Thank you so much.
Wonderful, excellent. Thank you very much, Uranik. And actually, you set it up very brilliantly here for the next speaker also, because we are turning to Mr. Agim Kukaj, who is with Ministry of Economy and Environment, and essentially one of the pen holders, influencers of the drafting of the coming digital strategy. So Uranik, you already laid out a lot of the elements here. So turning to Mr. Kukaj, as Kosovo is preparing this next digital master plan, if you will, what do you see now? A lot of things on the table for sure, but from your side, what do you see as sort of top 2-3 most important elements for this strategy? And also, if you see areas where you, either from experience, the past, or looking forward, where are areas where we can expect challenges or difficulties that maybe we should focus on as we go forward? Mr. Kukaj, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity to talk to you and to this distinguished panel today. And I'm really happy that I know most of you people who are around, and we have very good cooperation, and we will have very good cooperation because our aim is common aim in order to develop digital economy and digital component society of Kosovo. Let me say in the beginning that we are in the middle of creating a good ecosystem for digital transformation. We are in the beginning of digital transformation. I may say that because digital transformation, what is digital transformation today will not be digital transformation tomorrow. Because digital component is moving and new technologies are coming, and with artificial intelligence and all these challenges that humans are facing, we will have challenges in different directions. So as I said in the beginning, we are in the middle of creating this proper enabling environment to have digital transformation. So let me say and mention here very important facts that Kosovo is really progressing in broadband penetration. And that is thanks to the recent developments within the ministry in cooperation with the World Bank, that we are putting broadband infrastructure in every village in Kosovo. So I can freely say that we are now closing this gap in the country, and we have 99% of households already covered with broadband. When I say broadband, it's broadband 100 megabits per second, upgradable to 1 gig. So for the moment, I think that we don't have any challenge with regard to infrastructure. And if we continue, as Mergim Cahani said, and we need to have this continuation, I think that we are in a good way to solve the issue of access and to solve the issue of broadband. At the same time, we are connecting all schools and all health institutions for free to internet connectivity for free for the next 5 years. So we are somehow trying, while laying down fiber optics in the villages, at the same time connect this education institution, primary, secondary schools, and also health institutions. This is very important component, but the challenge is now mobile, and challenge is now how to see and how to adapt with the new technologies like 5G. And we were talking to the private sector, and they said that the biggest obstacle is that they are using this wireless technology in order to connect towers. So now we are trying, after we finish with the villages, we are now trying to connect their towers with the fiber broadband. So that's another project very important for creation of this enabling environment, beside good legislation we have in place. I can agree with everybody, and especially with Uranik, that we need to be more agile and maybe to adapt sooner. But you know, developing legislation, proper legislation, it's a procedure, and sometimes we are ending up with repetition, and we need to again and again apply to the parliament in order to have some piece of legislation approved. But anyhow, we are pushing hard and trying together with the private sector to really address their needs as much as possible. I'm sure that we are doing that in the best possible way, but we are trying to do it. Another important project that I would like to mention here, because it's we are talking about digital transformation, but we need to see where we are now in order to continue. It's national electronic identification system that we are setting up now, national electronic identification system, and it's a project with the support of European Commission. And I hope that in the next 2-3 years we will have unique electronic identification system in the country. Another area is digital skills, and here we had also a good cooperation with the Commission, European Commission, and they are supporting us on training youth. We have actually 2 big projects, training youth with high programming skills. One is from European Commission, 1,500 people, but another one is the World Bank, training youth with high programming skills. It's 2,000 people that will be trained in the next 2-3 years in order to close the gap, just to try to close the gap, because the private sector is having all the time open vacancies in order to address the skills gap, and big demand from the industry for new people, I mean highly skilled people. We would like to see more dynamic, more private sector development, and they are really working hard. I'm not sure that we are matching their needs, but I think that there is opportunity. And this is another thing that we have to work on, to see what can we do as a vertical industry, private sector, exporting services, I mean service sector, because you know, the market is small, so we need to see beyond Kosovo original borders. Here we have good cooperation with the private sector and also with the government. We were trying as a government to do something to lower the taxes or to remove some barriers, but still it's a long journey to work. The structure of the economy in Kosovo is a bit specific, and it's mostly medium and small enterprises or micro enterprises. And to work really and to make efforts for real digital transformation is not easy, because you know, you need special people, special departments that will work and take into consideration every company, every specific sector in order to really digitally transform. So I don't think so that we will not have here challenges, but slowly we need to do that. There is no other alternative, because Uranik was saying that we need somehow to identify where should Kosovo go. I don't think so that we have too many opportunities. We have 2-3 sectors that we have to push on. And we as a public administration, we are also in the side of the private sector to push politics and to push politicians to support the needs of the private sector. So these elections that are happening very often are somehow, you know, jeopardizing the focus, and this continuity is somehow, you know, discontinued. But still, we have very stable public administration till now, and we think that we can push things. I do hope that, as always, we will have good cooperation with the international community and try to use what we have created until now. Let me say that, okay, let's try to use this young population. Let's try to use this digital broadband infrastructure in the country, and new big projects are coming. So this is I think that the bottom line that we have to start and see what are, you know, some niche markets, what are the best things that Kosovo in the shortest possible time can see the benefit in order to have this real digital transformation in every sector. So maybe I exceeded my time, but I want to give you, you know, a picture of what's going on from the government side at the national level. So thank you again.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Kukaj. I really have to congratulate the whole panel. You are making my life very easy because you are setting me up now for the next speaker excellently. And we can come back, Mr. Kukaj, also to dive deeper if you see specific sectors potentially where there's potential from what you just talked about now. But really, so Jeta Zagragja from Director Business Operations UCXmarket. So Mr. Kukaj already talked about, I guess, some of your clients. So what do you see in terms of attitudes from entrepreneurs or companies larger than the SMEs for sure also that you engage with in terms of either from conceptualization moving digital or businesses that are already well established, can be small, big, analog even, of attitudes towards moving in your direction and working with you to take their products and ideas and services to an e-market. What trends and attitudes do you see, and where? What are some of the pain points that you are sensing from your clients? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm honored to be part of this panel and really valuable discussion so far coming from different perspectives, all that kind of fulfill that ecosystem that enables the digital space to actually take shape and form and get some executable ideas and processes. Onto more of onto what I can stand behind and closer, where I'm closer to on my day-to-day job, is working with entrepreneurs who want to get their businesses, their ideas, their products, and sell them online. I think from only observing what's happening in Kosovo and what has happened during the pandemic, especially, I could probably draw a parallel to Kosovo in the 90s, when Kosovars just picked it up and did what they had to do to had jobs to create jobs to sustain themselves. When they were kind of kicked out of the jobs and they found means to basically survive, and most of them moved into the trade industry, trading different products back then in an analog way. And this time, due to the lockdown, we've seen a lot of sellers pop in virtually, not all in structured, probably proper logistical means of transferring the goods from distributors to sellers, probably some of those not even legal. However, there have been a lot of movements in virtualizing the sales as a mandatory movement into their businesses. Some of the obstacles, although we work mostly with businesses in the US and we have only touched a few in the region, we see that some of the obstacles are similar and some are only kind of attributed to us as a developing country. In most of the developing countries, e-commerce is seen to be that focus where it could bring economic prosperity. However, I think Kosovo, like a few others, still has some of probably the basic obstacles, which are the legal system, which does not necessarily protect either buyers or sellers, which makes sellers and buyers reluctant to engage in a virtual sales, virtual buying and selling process. Obviously, another key one is, although it has resulted not to be a showstopper, but is the inflexibility of the banking system and integration with different payment systems to enable transactions, and which is obviously as a result of our cash-dominant economy, cash-based economy, and lack of credit cards to enable those payments through the different e-commerce platforms. I think one of the key one, which is same probably for businesses everywhere, it's not easy to pick up your business, to change the structure, the operational costs, and the structure is typically the most difficult one to change, to transfer from selling in the traditional ways to selling virtually. And here I want to point out three different, so basically it's operational, it's human, and it's technological obstacles that all come into play for businesses locally, mostly regional, but it could be wider than this. What we see this day to day, that it is typically costly. When I say on the operational is the business structure, are the people, the processes, distribution channels, the way products come to them, which is a much bigger and wider, more complex issue to consider versus having access to an e-commerce or getting a subscription to a reliable e-commerce platform. The human challenges that we see here, and we do see with our customers globally that we work with, is that skill set that's needed to perform the duties digitally, to make sure that the access on day-to-day, we're close to American businesses via means of calls and video conferencing, like what we're doing, where all of us are sitting in Pristina currently, but we're meeting virtually. And these challenges in Kosovo are, I think, a bit more dominant. Although we have a very young population, typically good English skills, which would just widen their perspective and understand what needs to be done, just access to knowledge, basically. And I think we do have that entrepreneurship spirit to move faster. And also, it's pro and a con on both. Most of our businesses are small to medium sized, which makes them a bit more agile, more quickly to move. But on the other hand, they lack capital. They lack, in order to facilitate the virtual selling process through different e-commerces, there is the problem of the technology, knowledge, putting inventory into have it in a way, good management of inventory, of distribution channels, and all the logistics that come with it, which you cannot only sell online and manage that analog. So it has to virtualize, to digitalize the whole sale process of picking up the products, managing inventory, shipping, selling, promoting, etc., the whole 9 yards. What I see as another problem, both from buyers and sellers, because the two have to meet, is the trust due to a lot, maybe cybersecurity, different cybersecurity attacks, and lack of knowledge how to get protected from those situations. And I think here we would need Kosovo to work on the legal system better, so that sellers do feel a bit more confident into putting their products virtually and be protected, and also buyers to feel confident in making these transactions in the virtual space. I think overall, I remain optimistic due to I think the energy, the spirit, young population. Honestly, overall, most of them, at the end of it, the need to figure out and to work in fields and the roles that don't have boundaries, and internet enables us to sell anywhere, to exceed borders, to get the knowledge. And so I think there is a lot of perspective, but we need to work with people's skills, building people's skills, the legal system, establish a stronger, more confident legal system, and also a financial or banking system that will make the integration of the different payment systems easier and slowly transform the economy from heavily dependent on cash to more credit cards and other means of payments.
Thanks, Jeta. That was very excellent. You covered a lot of ground here. My notepad is full. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. So last speaker in the first round, Donjeta Sahatçiu. Donjeta, let me say Donjeta. Welcome. And you are, so as president of board for STIKK, so this Kosovo Association for ICT, from your side and your members, what are the main challenges that pop up, maybe in addition to what we've heard already from your membership businesses, in particular, in terms of digital transformation, whether it's regulatory side or also there's the skill element that's come up a number of times, but also capacity of businesses and institutions to really make that transformational leap. The floor is yours.
Thank you. On behalf of the Kosovo ICT Association members and partners, I would like to thank you for the invite to the discussion today and to allowing us to contribute to the very much welcomed digital readiness assessment tool that you're piloting. Indeed, a holistic and a comprehensive plan is essential, and we do fully support it. As we continue also to support the government and institutions and some of the people here present from their side, which we know and have been collaborating for years and years, especially in helping them develop the strategy for Kosovo's future digital agenda. Almost a year end now, since we first went into total lockdown, we are particularly reflecting on the aftermath of pandemics and the beginning of societal digitalization journey. We witnessed an unprecedented demand for digital solutions in Kosovo after many, many years of investment from our members and partners and local entrepreneurs to kind of introduce and deliver digital solutions to Kosovo market. So to SMEs, to government institutions and everywhere. Someone before me mentioned correctly that I think it was Uranik that said that we are doing a lot of export, which indeed we could have been using more and more the youthful and trained resources we have here to contribute within first and then export. So I'm really looking forward to this new strategy and agenda and to see how we can really turn our focus inside and then go outside, because it is a need. The first challenge, so I would like to list maybe challenges from the businesses we work with, so our end customers or clients abroad, and then also to introduce some of the things we published as an association for needs for our own partners in the community. So the first challenges for businesses for which we provide solutions in digital transformation accounts for limited understanding of what digital transformation really is. So day by day, we meet a lot of people that actually don't understand what it is, what it means. It definitely, it's not just putting AI everywhere or replacing people with technology. It is more of ensuring awareness that transformation goes above and beyond the focus on technology, and that it is a shift in mindset. It is a shift in organizational culture, the way we work, the way we think. So we need to rethink the business model. We need to rethink, to revamp also the outdated KPIs each of the businesses have. They just can't transform within a night the business model and the KPIs they have so far from a physical mode to a digital mode. So and especially including employees, because we have witnessed a pushback from the civil servants in the institutions, from employees that are not necessarily young and part of these training schemes we've been mentioning, but there's a great deal of them, and we have to include them in everything we do and understand where they come from and how we can help them be as more inclusive in this process. Second would be maybe the limited expertise, as we all mentioned here. Of course, human capital is an ongoing need, and I think it's going to be here. It's here to stay. As we are developing, our companies need to scale, and it is very difficult to scale when you don't have trained resources. And especially in this digitalization era, we need a lot of new roles, a lot of new expertise. And things are changing every day, so we need to keep investing in that. Thirdly would be limited budget and maybe infrastructure, if I can put them all in one group. And what I mean by infrastructure is mostly on yes, it is payment gateway. We have been improving in this regard in the past years, but still we're not there yet. So the demand is higher for more sustainable capacities and infrastructures. For example, PayPal is not available here, so we need to lobby in order to introduce them as a country. We have a lot of clientele demand for introducing PayPal as the payment gateway, etc., etc. Access to finance. So for most of our startups, for most of our new businesses, access to finance remains a problem. So it takes a budget to go digital. You cannot go digital with the same budget that you have. You need to have a sort of a plan, add resources, so scale, invest in technology, invest in redefining the organizational culture and the roadmap, the strategy, so that costs. And access to finance remains an issue. Inclusion of women entrepreneurs, I would like to stress this also in terms of infrastructure, because according to the latest report published in December 2020 by the Kosovo Statistics Agency, women are still not having the right access to internet and smart devices, and are not using internet as men are. And this, in a sense, is hindering the opportunities of women entrepreneurs, not in Pristina, because we tend to focus a lot in bigger cities, but I'm talking so only all over Kosovo, from maybe a small city or a countryside where a lot of women entrepreneurs have business ideas and they can go digital and they can export their products, but they just don't have the right access to a device, to the know-how, how to use the tools, and how to perform better in what they're doing now. The opportunities are endless. What we need, I think, to push forward, if we can be sort of the pioneers of our country's historic digital transformation as a whole, is to push forward the concept of agility, so agile workflow, and maybe also a leaner processes, the concept of what a leaner process is and how that helps us and it reduces the bottlenecks we often find ourselves stumbling upon, so that we can adjust, we can improve, and of course we can grow all together. And just recently, as an association, along with STIKK, we published a list of interventions that we think are a must. So we published them for the government. We used this pre-election era that everyone is tackling and talking about technology and what they should do. So we kind of use this opportunity in the space to outline the needs from the sector, from within. And I can just mention maybe a few, and I can invite you to visit either STIKK's or STIKK's website or social media, and you will find the full list. It's a 3-pager of interventions that we published. But one of the main interventions there, and especially keeping in mind the vision. Yes, so the vision is to promote the digital transformation and to support Kosovo to become a knowledge-based economy from that end. So that is the main vision. I can mention from the legislation part, the intervention pillar, the law on e-commerce, online commerce, the law on electronic signature, digital signature, then in the sense of the financial support to establish a development fund that I mentioned for Kosovo IT enterprises, including the startups, which have no access at all. They cannot even get loans as per the legislation we have here. Creating tax incentives for investments, for R&D especially, and certifications and training resources. And in education, the one that I particularly love also personally is introducing coding as a subject in the curricula for the first grade of primary school. I think we have to start from there, and we're a bit late in that sense, considering the youth and the need to stay in Kosovo and not go abroad. We need to do this as quickly as possible. This is all for the first question. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Donjeta. I'm not going to tie this together, no way. But so we have a bit of time still. We will tweak a bit at the end of the program, so we can do another round with a few more snippets from the excellent panel. I know, Rob, you have to go at one point, so I'll turn to you first. So I mean, yeah, so a lot is on the table now from different sides of the societal spectrum here. So from your office in New York, do we see any strong features? What are strong features really that we see of successfully digital transformed societies or elements of? And if I may add a snack to that also, if you want to come in also to say a bit on the sort of inequality or access to point that came earlier. I think there were two. One for sure came strongly now, and yet it's clear on the gender side. There's a big focus. There should be a big focus. We have a big focus, and many have a big focus, but we need to understand what this means. But there's also another dimension to this potentially, Rob. I don't know if you have views on it, on sort of intergenerational potential exclusion. And so Donjeta, you mentioned a bit on the training side. Obviously, we've heard it from other of our partners also that sort of more experienced, say elderly colleagues are not necessarily as adaptive to, and that potentially, if you take it to grander scale, means there's a whole different cohort of people in the society that potentially can get excluded. Rob, over to you. Thank you.
No, thanks again, Niels. And I have to say, it is extremely impressive to hear all of the speakers on this panel talk about the work that's going on in Kosovo right now. And even beyond the work, it's about the dialogue going on. And this is something extremely healthy, extremely refreshing to hear, because we don't hear it in every place. And so from what I have heard so far from Mr. Kukaj and the other speakers, is there are really, Niels, your question is about what are the kind of fundamental characteristics we see. And of course, there are all of the elements that have been talked about so far, the elements around physical infrastructure and government organization and infrastructure, the regulatory environment, how the business sector is set up, and how people and the digital skill sets are there. So all of these are fundamental factors, as well as those kind of base layers of the foundations of the payment system, like a fundamental architecture for payments and identity and ability to exchange data across a society. So I think the issue is that in a sort of a ideal digital transformation, there's the correct balance between all of those and the ability to reach all parts of society. And that's not easy. That's not easy for any country in the world, any society in the world, any government in the world. And so I think it comes down to, when Kosovo is doing this reflection, it's about, do we have the right balance, or where do we have those shortcomings that we need to add a little bit more? And so Niels, you mentioned the digital divide, and Donjeta actually mentioned that as well. So we have to look carefully at the accessibility of not just internet, but also skill set and knowledge between men and women. Is there a difference there? Also between generations, we absolutely see that across many countries. And we've seen, particularly in the light of the COVID pandemic, as governments and others, even businesses, move quickly to go to online environments, there are often elderly people that are left out of that. So how can we include that? And we see some interesting experiments in that from other countries. platforms that can link volunteers to reach elderly people or relatives. So there's good work that's done, but you have to be conscious of it and work toward it. So certainly the equitable access across society, also rural to urban, makes a big difference sometimes in terms of connectivity and availability of services. We also see an issue, and Mr. Kukaj talked a little bit about this, but a difference sometimes between different ministries within one government. Some might be more advanced than others, and trying to get the balance there and keep them aligned is a tricky aspect as well. And so we generally recommend, if it's possible, to look really at a whole of government kind of strategy and ambition, so that the individual ministries are not rushing to put systems in place that then are not interoperable with the others, because that's a big problem that we do see. And overall, what the trend is toward, rather than individual parts of government or parts of society rushing for individual projects in digital, it's a more strategic approach. So how can we really see all of the moving pieces? How can we pull that together and have a joint effort at pushing forward? And then the last thing maybe that is, Donjeta mentioned it, but also others, it's really looking at, do you have an agility or an agile society that is able to embrace new, not just technologies, but new ways of doing things? And I think it's very positive, the comparison with the how, in the light of crisis, companies in Kosovo and entrepreneurs have rushed to go online and embrace e-commerce and find that as a new platform. This kind of agility is extremely important. And that's why even when we talk about digital transformation within UNDP as an organization, it is really not just about the technology. It is about the ability of the organization to embrace new ways of doing things and new technologies as they come. And that's the same thing that we recommend and that we see in governments who have made the most progress on that. It is about understanding there's a new mindset about how to embrace it. So I think it's these balance issues, it's the understanding of equity, the inclusiveness, and overall that agility, which really makes the strongest digital transformation possible. And I'm very, very encouraged by what I'm hearing in the panel today.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rob. And feel free to sneak out same way you came in if you have to run at one point.
No, I'm okay for a while. I'll stay.
Good. Okay. Okay. Thank you. So, Mr. Gashi, we'll just follow the same round. So this is the final round, and I have a question, but really, if there are things on the table, because there's a lot on the table here that you want to pick up on, feel free to completely disregard any word I'm saying in terms of question and pick on what you feel is interesting. But really, we wanted you to come in a bit on the in terms of the regulatory frameworks on digital governance. For you to come in a bit and say about talk a bit to that, but speak to that, but feel free also to pick from what panel members have raised. But we are a bit on time, a timetable, so the floor is yours. But go ahead, thanks.
Faleminderit, Nils. Mirë, ka shumë çështje, vërtet ishin çështje tamam adekuate që u prekën nga panelistët, nga parafolësit, dhe gjithnjë konsideroj se komponentet e përbashkëta mes sektorëve të ndryshëm që aktualisht po diskutohen dhe keni organizuar një përbërje të shkëlqyeshme të njerëzve adekuat që mund të flasin vërtet me kompetencë për çështjen e transformimit digital, janë elemente shumë të rëndësishme. Unë du të ritheksoj edhe fjalën e zotit Robertov që theksoj aspektin sfidues që mund të jetë përveç aspekteve rregulative ligjore, janë edhe aspektet që sistemet janë zhvilluar në mënyrë parciale dhe ka probleme ndoshta në mas të konsiderueshme, ku ka pas një disproporcion mes trendit të zhvillimeve në institucione në relacion me institucione tjera. Dhe për atë arsye ne jemi përpjek dhe me prioritet kemi punu në ndërtimin e platformës së interoperabilitetit, gjë që ka kthy një stabilitet dhe ka orientu, ka dhënë një rrugë të mbarë drejt orientimit, drejt transformimit digital. Gjithashtu, ndoshta sfidë ka qenë mungesa e një strategjie të e-qeverisjes, e cila nga qeveria e Kosovës nuk ka arrit të draftohet dhe të vazhdohet si strategji e updateuar. Si rezultati asaj, ndoshta ka pas një disproporcion investimesh mandej dhe një shpërputhje mes orientimeve të përbashkëta drejt transformimit digital. Në anën tjetër, duhet ta theksojmë se ka një varg aktesh ligjore dhe nënligjore, duke përfshi ligjin për organet qeveritare të shoqërisë së informacionit dhe akte tjera ligjore, të cilat rregullojnë në mas të mirë elementet dhe parakushtet e transformimit digital. Mirë po, duhet të themi se ka mungesë të respektimit të kësaj kornize ligjore. Në anën tjetër është korniza e interoperabilitetit, e cila në mas jo sa duhet aplikohet dhe zbatohet nga institucionet, si dhe ka një mungesë zbatimit të ligjit sa i përket rregulloreve që përcaktojnë kriteret e investimeve në teknologji. Këto rregullore në mas të mirë kanë përshkru procesin e investimeve në mënyrë të koordinuar dhe të harmonizuar, për faktin se transformimi digital nuk është element parcial, është një tanësi, është diçka komplekse dhe gjithsesi duhet ketë një harmonizim jo vetëm brenda institucioneve qeveritare, por një harmonizim edhe me sektorin privat, edhe me shoqërinë civile dhe me të gjitha akterët. Kolegu im Agimi e theksoi shumë mirë që ka një zhvillim në infrastrukturë, edhe në aspektin e infrastrukturës për përdorim nga qytetarët dhe popullsia, dhe kjo besoj që do të krijonte një parakusht jashtëzakonisht të mirë që ne të vazhdojmë me transformimin digital si objektiv e përbashkët e institucioneve shtetërore dhe objektive organizatave ndërkombëtare që aktualisht dhe shteteve aleate me një përvojë të jashtëzakonshme që po na ndihmojnë në këtë drejtim. Dhe unë konsideroj se kemi disa elemente që nuk janë në mos të duhur në harmoni. Mirë, por nuk them se nuk ka parakushte që këto puzzle të harmonizohen dhe të ndërtojnë pikturën e madhe të transformimit digital.
Thank you, Mr. Gashi. Turning to Uranik, Donjeta talked about it, Rob also now on the digital divide side. So from your side of the table, so to say, what are some of the concerns in terms of both strengthening access to, and this is maybe on the access to services side, as well as economic opportunities for how do we incentivize and accelerate access to, both on the service side, but also in terms of startups, creating viable businesses, economic opportunities for those groups, parts of the society that are more marginalized or not, as was mentioned by one, necessarily living in Iberia and Pristina.
Yeah, I have to agree with everything that was said. It was a great presentation overall, and I think we quite well complemented each other in really painting out a picture of where Kosovo stands on both on opportunities, but also challenges. I think something that was mentioned and maybe not stressed out enough is this, the fact that Kosovo is having way too many elections, and this is preventing us in really having a partner to dialogue with in really advancing any agenda, particularly that of digital economy, which we're aiming because frankly of the fast pace which the economy moves from. Now, in this regard, again, startups and let's say the startup ecosystem is no different. It's very fragile and frankly has been supported mainly by donor initiatives and the corporates, more mature companies that have been part of the, in this case of STIKK and the ICT Association, either through mentorship or guidance or even some small investments as a seed funding. But all in all, I think the picture, and Agim said rightfully, we don't have too many options. This is a sector which is clearly showing us the potential. We have the conditions of great infrastructure, great youth with great abilities to learn quickly and multilingual. And apart from that, we also have a problem. I mean, we have to understand, in a situation which we are in, with the political situation which we're in, with the limitation on visa travel, especially for youth. The options and use of digital economy becomes a natural way of engaging and creating services in order to break this, I would say, very unjust isolation which is happening to our youth. So problems are, I mean, if you talk about startup ecosystem in particular, I think anywhere you would go, people would complain about access to talent, in access to finance and everything. But Kosovo's situation is a bit unique, and from both ends, I think. In one end, we definitely are struggling to feed more people into the pipeline in order to get more qualitative labor force, in order to feed in our existing companies, but also create new startups. But on the other side, I think Kosovo has a great opportunity to tap into its diaspora community, which possesses a great and amazing potential for us to penetrate international markets. I think both in the system of brain gain now, if we want to reverse the model, in bringing really the digital solutions and innovation which are already applicable in their economies. And most of these people who are now either in universities or working for great corporates are very closely still connected with our communities and are willing to really support and give back, not just in the sense of funding and remittance as it usually has been, but really in bringing in their networks, in bringing in their knowledge and time, which is very important to stress out and really bring. We have, for example, a guy who works for Volvo in Sweden, and for the last 4 or 5 years, he offers free training every holiday he comes in, and during the summer for free in building some architecture systems, which he also works in. But also, apart from this one connection, many people now are working with him or aside in the same sector. So the model is there, but I would go back, and I think we cannot stress enough the importance of really having, and of course now it's unfair to me and to us because you have put here from the government 2 big supporters of our ecosystem and sector. Both Agim and Kujtim are very good close friends of ours, so we cannot really throw stones at the government right here. But really there is a lot of missed opportunities. And I think both Agim and Kujtim have been our voices within the government and really pushing and advancing our agenda forward. But I would have to say that we have really failed to act quick, although we have had great support both from donors in creating the proper both legislation, strategies and incentives in order to really advance and create opportunities for those that are interested. And when I say that, I don't mean just for the Kosovo's population, but also in attracting other foreign direct investors in the sector and really making Kosovo what it deserves to be, a successful story of the Balkans.
Thank you, Uranik. Turning quickly to Mr. Kukaj. We are a bit short on time, but staying on par with the notion of the digital divide, any comments from your side, any perspectives?
I mean, very quickly, Kosovo is very specific, and maybe that's sometimes the reason why we have some successes, and maybe sometimes we are, ending up late. So in terms of digital divide, in terms of infrastructure, I think that we don't have anymore any kind of bottleneck in that term. Our families are big, usually are big, especially in rural areas. There are, the average family in Kosovo is 6 members. So actually, it's a small portion of the population, especially elderly population, that is alone, and they need some, something addition in terms of digital, because they have families, they are living together, and that's the reason why we have also this penetration. Because if you buy internet connectivity in one house, you have it for 6 people or 7 people or 10 people in the rural areas. So this is very specific, but in terms of skills, and we can say that we are not so bad, but we cannot meet demand of the industry. So that's a bottleneck. And take into consideration education system that it's a bit, outdated with curricula, and we need a reform. And we are now trying to do the digitalization of the education system, and we are doing the strategy, national strategy for education. So we will address it this year, because we have seen that it was crucial to undertake such actions in the government to see what can we do quickly. And I do hope that we will have, with the new government, we have better results in education. It's not easy to transform education, but we are now trying to use some shortcuts and improve through different training programs, improve these digital skills in the country. Is that enough? I don't think so. That's enough. But we are slowly trying to close this gap, and I hope that with these reforms we will address it properly. However, let me say that I am very encouraged from Robert's comments and from the private sector of Kosovo, that is not having big demands. I mean, this is doable. What they are asking for is doable. I don't see any kind of obstacle of not having proper legislation, because we can do it. It's in our hands. But in another way, being agile for the government and for us, especially in the public administration, it's not easy task, because we have certain laws. We have public procurement law that sometimes it's an obstacle to be agile. Sometimes it's an obstacle to give to the best company the job or services or whatever, because there are certain rules that are very rigid. So, and this is stopping us to produce more with less money, let me say, value for money. So these are some things, but we need to run it and do it. And we have this opportunity this year. We are doing a new digital agenda for Kosovo that will cover next period 5, 6, or 10 years, and put the real foundation and try to be agile in meeting the needs of the private sector, especially, and we will do it through this dialogue. So I hope that now we are grown enough. When I say I'm saying public and private sector and academia and NGOs and international community, what we should focus. So this is encouraging, and so even this dialogue today, it's to open our eyes what we should do. So thanks again.
Thank you, Mr. Kukaj. Excellent. So Jeta, you cheated actually last time, because you in your answer you covered all the questions I had for you. So now I'm in trouble. So we wanted to hear a bit from you, sort of what do you see Kosovo should do in terms of incentivizing or enabling a bigger rush towards e-commerce, but you mentioned a lot already. So feel free also to pick from the floor of issues there. There's a question also in the chat box around, but Kukaj just came in on this, on the skills side, and need to consider this on the sort of curriculum, but maybe also other types of training skills. But the floor is yours, but this is a vague question for you.
Thank you. I'll keep in mind the time pressure that we're on. I wanted to summarize. I did cheat a little bit. I did mention a few of these things, but maybe in a more structured way. I think the 3 main changes that needs to happen in Kosovo in order to enable e-commerce platforms to space to be created and flourish, and that ecosystem around it is the education system, in order to create the right skills that would take on such transformation within the businesses, have spread out and have more inclusive, create a more inclusive environment for more of the workforce to be able to participate, These are not skills that everybody possesses or that are picked up kind of on the street. We need that. And we need that not only by ad hoc training, but through structured curricula, and as Donjeta mentioned, starting from elementary school. Given and understanding the changes in the political environment, very often changes in the political environment, I am a strong believer that such educational system that would basically enable all of us to hire the right resources and the economy to have that prosperity is something that is independent, something as a sovereign fund for education that would work on policies and on long-term investment in all the education, all the levels of education. The second one is the legal system that will protect both sellers and buyers to interact in a free and secure and transparent market. And that is what I did not include earlier, is also to protect sellers that are actually investing and using capital to put in to do this the right way. Because it is far more costly for Gjirafa to sell the way they sell and enable sellers to sell their products virtually versus what some other smaller sellers are picking up. So it's kind of a threefold legal system that would touch directly on this. And lastly, and I want to say that the priorities in my mind are exactly in this order: education, legal, and then payment system, to diversify means of payment, enable transactions that are not only cash transactions, which would also, I think, bring more transparency on the economy, on the exports, on employment, because we do depend a lot on the data that are, statistical data that are formal, but that does not represent our economy. So that's what I think the three main things need to change in a systematic way. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jeta. Donjeta, you mentioned it also in your first round. As I said, it's been in the chat and other colleagues have also spoken to it. We wanted to hear a bit from you on the skills side, educational system, but also beyond sort of the formal education skills. Any thoughts on what should be done, can be done, maybe is happening?
Yes, thank you. So skills, we often say that we have a lot of training providers, new ones coming each month. And yet again, we have lack of resources and trained resources. And I think one of the reasons why is because we tend to think long term, and that goes to the agility portion of it. So I'm more, as a sector, we're more interested in having things short term. So a strategy for a 2-year strategy that can be, but the focus should be in implementation, not just setting and developing one and having it on a website and address it in conferences and stuff, but not actually implement it and see things so that we can improve from it. I would like all the things that we've mentioned and that have been included in the policies and the strategies for skills, human capital development in the past years to be yet again part of the new strategy and to be later developed. I send kudos to Mr. Agrandida that wrote in chat. He's a strong supporter of everything we do, and as the curator and manager of his education video portal joy.com, he's raising this a lot also in public. So I thank you, Mr. Agrandida, for your presence here and addressing the focus on education, which I think is crucial. Yet again, this is not a problem in Kosovo alone. We see Germany as one of our close by country that is having a lot of problems with skilled resources. And they are, so to speak, targeting Kosovo young entrepreneurs and youngsters that are being trained here to kind of go there and find a job and leave. And that's where we have a brain drain right there. So I think this is a global issue because the technology is moving faster than the education systems and strategies can evolve. So I just think we need to be a more agile in the sense and just have a closer short-term look into it. One of the things I would like to mention also before I finish is that I keep hearing and we keep seeing as a sector a lot of institutions going digital, having online platforms for services, health services, public administration services, any type of service for citizens. But yet again, they are very done independently. So the users and citizens are confused because they all have their own websites, their own portals, and there's not one centralized portal that you can do everything there. And that we are also playing a role in confusing users. So we should be careful in that and try to be more structured in the sense and organized in how we become digital as the country and digitalize the services that our citizens need on day to day. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Donjeta. So before opening up, we are still okay on time. We'll squeeze the wrap up, but we have like 5, 8, maybe 9 minutes for a bit of Q&A. But before we open up the floor, a few questions are coming in, and participants, please do write in the chat or Q&A rather segment if you want. But before opening up, just turning to Mergim, if you kicked us off with 4 sort of strong pillars, and actually I've seen lines throughout all the interventions back to also your opening. Any thoughts as where we are right now before we open up for the floor? Any comments, rather?
Thank you, Niels. Yeah, before I would answer that, I would just join Uranik to confirm and second Kujtim's and Agim's support within the government from the private sector. I've had the chance to work with both of them. So Niels, I would like just to reinforce what we have said so far and just how I started with. We understand, I believe we're on the same page, that this is a paradigm shift. And in the paradigm shift, as with any paradigm shifts, certain premises are shaken. Certain axioms are no longer valid and not self-evident. And I think that's step one. Because what we have to do, I think it is a good start, and in time we'll know other things what we have to do, either by modeling from what others have done or what including the stakeholders. But why we are doing it and how we're going to do that, I think is just as critical. Otherwise, the success of those projects is very, very important. It's not just a matter to do it, but to be successful. So because of it, we have to reconsider a lot of things. And this is speaking in general terms, but to make it more concrete, and it can be applied in a lot of areas to be concrete. Let's look at regulation. I know that STIKK and others are advocating, pushing towards the certain law and regulations, whether it's digital signatures and others. And Agim, Kujtim mentioned earlier, certain regulation for portability between different ministries and different organizations within the government. I think those are important, but considering that certain premises may not be longer valid is one of the biggest hurdles, because as human beings, we are a priori given to think in certain way that we have thought, and changing that is very difficult. But unless we change it, we might come to some obstacles that we may be able to prevent. For instance, if we do regulations in e-commerce and others, which help for digital signature to be legal, or procurement system within the government, or interoperability, not to have the proper education, the skills to do it proper so that it doesn't defeat the purpose why you're creating it in the first place. It fixes one thing and that opens certain challenges along the way. That's one of the biggest challenges that I foresee to be upcoming, could be upcoming in the digital transformation. And again, out of the 5 points that I mentioned, I would like to close with re-emphasizing, I think, because agility, continuity, education, and others we mentioned, all of us, but I think we have to consider this as a transformation of digitalization, because it's a paradigm shift. This is, as Robert mentioned earlier, it's the new way of doing things. It's not just doing the same thing like we have done before, but using technology. It's actually using technology to do things, to achieve the objective of things we have done in the past in the most effective and efficient manner. And I think that's has to be one of the key elements to look forward. But again, thanks to all the attendees and being here. I will close it here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Agim, for actually wrapping up the panel session for me. Thanks a lot for that. Just seeing a few comments in the chat, Luanda, any hands on the floor? We have still a good number of colleagues, friends, and partners attending. I don't want to call you out to give you the mic, but I could.
Can I comment real
quick? Please, Uranik. Yeah.
Can I comment on maybe very quickly on the education, especially we have worked very closely with EFCA, who is now part of ALA too, but I think our previous project was on CCEL a long time ago in trying to introduce really the entrepreneurial learning into schools. And I think this is very critical because as we work with entrepreneurs, we see that their entrepreneurial skills are not at the levels we would want them to see, although their ambition and willingness and they have very big risk appetite, which are very good preconditions. But there's some elements I think which have to be nurtured from very early childhood, and things like creativity, teamwork, and creative thinking, and many other elements. Which I think the educational system should work on. It's very, very important. And I think it's very important that in this case, EFCA stresses this also, along with building an infrastructure and along with building with also technicalities. I think we have to bear in mind that, again, we have to deal with humans, and the humans will be eventually the drivers of all of this that we are set to make as a new setting, in order to advance something or change our position to a more positive one. So this is very important, and this also goes in line with the comments of Mr. Dida, who's been a great supporter, but also has worked through his entire life in really building a strong and sound ecosystem. And definitely the educational system will be shown to be a big also an opportunity, but at this moment an obstacle of moving forward. So I appreciate these two comments, and definitely something that we need to address. But I have to point something out which also relates to something we discussed before. In all of this, public-private partnership is critical. Because what we see, while we see a complete disorientation within the governments previous and these ones, and lack of institutional memory, part of it has to do also with the private sector. And when I say private, I don't mean just companies, but also the association and other NGOs which are very active. And I see a tendency of the ministries and certain political players trying to get the best out of a private sector, only to go and advance their political agenda on a sole territory and promote things as their own. And that alone does not give any sustainability to any project. So if we want a real close advancement of any field, I think public-private partnership should be very critical. And I think as we are offering our hand, and definitely we've seen some great partnerships in this panel, definitely this needs to be to advance to certain levels. And we know why this happens. Obviously, our recent history does not show very positive experience between public and private partnership, partially because corruption, but that shouldn't really prevent us in creating real communication tools in order to advance our in this case digital agenda. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Uranik. So rather than wrapping up the panel, because this has really been too rich for my analog note-taking to wrap up, really we wanted to move to the last segment, which is really a very, very short thing, just to say, and essentially going back also to Rob's point, a key determinant around success is dialogue. So what we have done today, obviously, is in this field, but really what we, as UNDP, would like to facilitate going forward is some further data analysis crunching together with dialogue in order to understand opportunities, but also where pain points are, not necessarily and absolutely not for us to solve, but for joint solutions. So just to go about one back, yeah, no, it's okay. So really a big round of thanks to the panel members for taking us through what I found was really an excellent discussion. We haven't seen any hands from the floor, so we take all concerns, answers, not answers, questions were met. We've had a few in the Q&A box, and they were addressed. There were some specific suggestions also on the specific types of training. But so moving into sort of the closing segment, which is not a summary by any means, but really to explain what we would like to try and do going forward as UNDP. But this is really in the category of partnership. So together with many of you around the table, but also with many more in Kosovo. So I'd like to ask our colleague who is kept awake throughout, despite very early hours in LA, Mark Belinsky, to come in and help me do this closing. Mark, so we are planning to do a digital readiness assessment here in Kosovo with a lot of partners. It's early days for UNDP to do this, so we are in a pilot phase globally, and we will try it out and learn from it here in Kosovo. Over to you. What can we expect here, and what are we seeing on the screen?
Thank you so much, Niels, and it's been such a stimulating conversation, so it's been very easy to stay awake here on the West Coast of the US. It's been really stimulating to hear because this is an additive approach to a lot of the conversation that's been happening. There are a lot of comments that reinforce this and the need for a whole of society approach. If there's just a focus on one area, it just won't work. And so this is the lens through which we're going to be conducting our digital readiness assessment and how we think about how do we approach this conversation as a whole. And so we start with strategy and really understanding the ambition, funding, agility was mentioned a number of times. I think Mr. Cahani framed it as a paradigm shift. And how do we think about transformation as digitalization rather than just digitization, and how to pursue this process. And we can consider his 5 pillars as his 5 principles as part of this. We look at catalysts for digital inclusion. As UNDP, our perspective is that an inclusive digital transformation is likely going to result in a more fast and sustainable process. And so the need for digital to be inclusive is really critical. This all sits upon 5 pillars through which we need to focus on how do we approach this to ensure success. So initially looking at infrastructure, and Mr. Kukaj mentioned that the internet is at least 100 megs per second, if not a gigabyte. So I will soon be moving to Kosovo. And as Mr. Gashi mentioned, it's a precondition, but also can't be the only focus. Mr. Begu mentioned how do we focus locally from diaspora to innovation centers and coding communities. It's not just the hard infrastructure, but also the soft infrastructure of these communities and ecosystems. Within the government, it's great to see such engagement and such thoughtfulness. There needs to be a coordination, which was also mentioned. I think Ms. Zagragja, and apologies for butchering any names, mentioned in regulation very important fundamentals around protecting buyers and sellers if there's going to be a focus on e-commerce and a need to approach regulation in a considered way if any of these efforts are really going to be successful. The business side seems extraordinarily engaged here, and it's stronger here than in many areas. This requirement for public-private partnership is often a forgotten element, but really prioritized here. So it's exciting to see. And the people themselves also really need to be incorporated. Sure, they're entrepreneurial, but as Ms. Sahatçiu perfectly framed, that if the tech's not inclusive and some employees are left behind, then there will be pushback. Similarly with the inclusion of women, there needs to be a real thoughtfulness about inclusivity, because without that, the pushback can lead to the whole system really falling apart. In the sectoral opportunities, Mr. Kukaj and Mr. Gashi both mentioned which areas need focus. Each country has different drivers of the economy, different SDG priorities, and they need to be considered and can be looked at through this lens. And then we look at the digital foundations and what can really be accelerants to the entire process. So payments, as Ms. Sahatçiu mentioned, as well as digital legal identity, data exchange systems can really help throughout. And so those are the foundational elements.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mark. So let's go to the next slide. One more hit. Bright red color there. So essentially we are moving into it's a three-step process. We're in the first step now, stage one, so to say, where we are getting ready with, from our side, some tools to try and extract opinions, feedback, but also see analysis and data to understand better context, as has been described already from the panel. So I'm sure the discussion today will be part of the assessment for sure. We are planning to launch after the elections, so on the 18th of February. If you move to the next slide, just to say that in terms of gathering information, we're looking at three avenues. One is related to public administration institutions, central level. Another with businesses, associations, but also CSOs, and a third with people. And along these, just go back, please. Along these three avenues, we will apply different approaches to gathering insights. We will, and that's on the 18th, get ready with an online survey that we will send out to as many as possible. And that's where you also come in to either receive or guide us who to target from both the public side, but also on the business side. We will also do, those will be the orange colors. We will also be looking at, obviously, desk review. There's already a lot of analysis and information out there. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. So we will be gathering that also, as well as, and now we're in the red color, do some targeted conversations with focus groups. In addition, we will also use, now in the black color, two instruments that UNDP Kosovo has in terms of gathering public insights with usually a 1,500 target group of respondents, a socioeconomic impact assessment that we have started. We've run two now under COVID, and a third is coming later this month, where we'll reach approximately 1,500 people with specific questions on perceptions and their understanding and their opinions. And similar, we also have, and this is now 10 plus years, instrument running twice a year, go out to the market and get information and perceptions, information back from Kosovars through our public pulse, it's called. And we'll do that a bit later in Q2. It's set to start. We will also include some information gathering from the public. That's it. Next. Yeah. So those are that's the first stage. The next stages are, and I think Mergim, you mentioned up front, it's good not to have an end date. We don't have an end date here, and so we will not dive too much into the next stages. But the next stages are really going deeper, also in terms of municipal level or local levels, and obviously on the citizen side. But also to zoom more in on specific sectors that has potential for expansion and so forth. So this is the journey we are starting. Go to the last slide. Yeah, okay. So this is the journey we are starting. The conversation today is to kick it off. We We want to hear from you. We want to speak with you. We want to partner with you and receive your feedback, ideas and suggestions. We want you to help us gather as much information as possible, if you can, by also leveraging your networks. So we will reach out to you, whether speakers or participants, to help us with that, and hope that you will be joining hands with us in this journey of exploration. There's a contact point, but we will share that also through other means. That is it from mine. Thanks a lot to all speakers and panel. Over to Luanda.
I think Mr. Gashi has raised his hand. I see here. Maybe if you want to say, that's all right. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you to all, and especially to our brilliant panelists for your insight and expertise and sharing them with us this afternoon. As Niels just mentioned, you have given us a lot of food for thought, and we will be in touch with you very soon for our upcoming survey. And on behalf also of the digitalization team, thank you for partaking in this seminar to all our participants. We have a great deal of people here, and we also invite us to contact us if you're interested to support us in this process and also be our champion like Mr. Gashi here. Thank you. Ju faleminderit. Have a good afternoon and ditë mbar.
Faleminderit, mirupafshim.
Faleminderit shumë.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye bye.